Meanwhile, President Trump set to meet with Russia's Vladimir Putin next Friday in Alaska to discuss a path forward on a potential peace deal with Ukraine. Lucas Tomlinson is at the White House with more on these fast-moving details. Lucas, what can you tell us?
Well, good morning, Brian. The news broke on Special Report with Bret Baier last night. President Trump will be meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska this Friday. And Trump acknowledged while talking about it that ending Russia's war in Ukraine will not be easy.
It's actually nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both.
Now, it's not clear what territory would be swapped, Brian. Russia occupies about 20% of Ukraine, and Ukraine only controls about 30 square miles of Kursk after it launched an incursion into Russia last year. Some think Putin agreed to Alaska so his plane isn't shot down while flying elsewhere. Alaska was purchased from Russia in 1867, Russia needing the money, of course, after the Crimean War. The price, $7.2 million, about 2 cents an acre. Now, some Eastern Europeans are afraid this summit is heading to another Munich-like moment. Before World War II, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky left out of the talks, ruled out ceding any land to Russia, posting on X this morning, quote, President Trump announced preparations for his meeting with Putin in Alaska, very far away from this war, which is raging on our land, against our people, and which, anyway, can't be ended without us, without Ukraine. Now, a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine remains elusive. Russian drones manufactured with the help from China and Iran continue to rain down almost a nightly basis across Ukraine, hitting and killing civilians. Russia makes more ammunition today than all of NATO combined right now, including the United States. Putin spends 40% of his budget on the military, and Putin has been wary about letting these soldiers in Ukraine return home. And Ukraine says 20,000 of his children have been taken captive by Russian soldiers. Now, some foreign policy experts say that it was Trump's tariffs on India that led to Putin agreeing to this summit. Trump saying he's going to double tariffs on India, of course, a major importer of Russian oil. And before Russia's full-scale invasion, Brian, India only imported a small fraction of its oil from Russia. It now gets about 40% of its oil from Russia.
Lucas Tomlinson live at the White House. Lucas, thank you for that report. Now, as President Trump and Putin prepare for Friday's meeting, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his people won't give up any territory to Russia. So is a deal still possible? Former Deputy National Security Advisor Victoria Coates is with me now. Victoria, thank you so much for being here. A lot has changed in just the last 24 hours, certainly. The big question here is something that Lucas alluded to. We saw this in 2014 when it came to Crimea. Putin asked for a peace deal. A peace deal was brokered. And then 8 years later, we had the current Ukraine war. It did not last. He was able to gain more military leverage, was able to prepare for that invasion. Are you concerned that this is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants to do this time? Freeze and pause this to avoid tariffs and sanctions now for then further military escalation later on?
Well, Brian, it's a valid concern, but I think we have a very different president here with President Trump than President Obama. And I think President Trump is interested in getting to a resolution of this war from a position of strength. So look at what he's done with NATO. This is very far from what President Obama did. He's gotten our NATO allies to commit to 5% of GDP on defense. And that dwarfs anything Russia can do. Yes, they're producing, as Lucas reported, a lot more ammunition than we do. We need to get after that, but we can do it. The combined economies of the EU and the United States are put Russia to shame. And Putin has a lot of other economic problems. And I agree, as you said, that India is going to be a major player in this. But India is a partner and ally to us. So, yes, the president's been tough on them recently. He should be to get their attention. But that's a relationship that can very much, again, contribute to his position of strength going into these negotiations.
Right. So we talked about India, which is purchasing Russian oil, which is why the United States and why President Trump has increased tariffs. I want to talk to you about Zelensky's point of view here. Now, he is not being included in these talks on August 15th in Alaska, at least not yet. And it seems like this is going to be a two-phase thing, reportedly. The first phase, they pause the lines, and then the second phase is they agree to some sort of a peace deal that is then agreed upon by Zelensky. And Zelensky's saying, I'm not giving up any land. And the president said yesterday yesterday he thinks that there'll be a swap of territory. If I want to pull up the map here, 20% of Ukraine is now under control by Russia. What kind of a swap of land do you think can happen here when you have Zelensky saying, I am not interested at all in ceding any of that territory that you see in red there to the Russians?
Well, I think, of course, both Russia and Ukraine are going to take sort of maximalist positions now going into negotiations. And Putin has shifted a little bit on his willingness to meet with Zelensky. 10 days ago, it was absolutely off the table. He'd never do it. Now there are apparently some circumstances under which he will. We'll see what happens on August 15th. But I think, in terms of land swaps, if you go back to the end of World War II and the establishment of the Soviet Empire in Eastern Europe and all of those countries, including Ukraine, including Azerbaijan and Armenia, both of which, the heads of which were at the White House yesterday signing a historic peace deal, they were all under Soviet domination, but the United States never recognized that. We always recognized them as sovereign, independent nations. We had what we called Captive Nations Week every year in the Congress, and eventually they were liberated again. So I think the key thing is not to recognize any kind of Russian domination over Ukrainian territory. And Zelensky said as much in February when he was talking about this, that he would never recognize it. That's absolutely his right. And so I think this is going to be a difficult negotiation. Everyone may wind up being equally unhappy, as President Trump says, but the key is to get to that ceasefire, end the killing, and then start the rebuilding of Ukraine.
Victoria, I guess ultimately the question here is also when it comes to Zelensky. If we have Putin and Trump sitting in a meeting and they agreed to a peace deal, do you see any world here where Zelensky can ally with the Europeans and say, no, I'm not going to accept that deal? Or do you think Zelensky finds himself in a place where he will be forced to have to accept a deal brokered by Russia and the United States?
I don't think it's going to be that draconian, Brian. I mean, I know the president is engaging with our European allies on these negotiations. He's consulting with the United Kingdom, France, Germany. And so I think that they are going to be bought into any agreement. And of course, they've said, Ukraine will have to be part of any final negotiation. This is really, I think, President Trump exploring what might be possible with Putin at this point in time.
And my last quick question, just 20 seconds, Victoria. The fact that this meeting is happening in Alaska, some critics have said that this means that Putin has already won. The fact that he has been invited by the United States to U.S. territory to have this conversation. Your response to that quickly?
No, I think that it's absolutely the opposite. This is a home game for President Trump. Alaska is a territory we bought, as Lucas was saying, from the Russians in the 19th century. It's now one of the cornerstones of our energy dominance, and we're going to expand that energy production. That's hardly a win for Putin.
Victoria Coates, thank you so much for your expertise. I learned a lot there. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.